Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Something More podcast this evening with Pete Gower. We are recording this evening, but it's going to be great to watch this back with you, and I'll be there in the comments interacting with all you guys as we watch and discuss together. And this evening we are talking about church planting, which I know has been something that's been on our heart as a church for a long time. And that's something that Pete has been doing for the last little while. And so it's going to be great to kind of hear from his experiences this evening. He's doing a fantastic work down in Liverpool, doing a revitalization project in a church, which might not make any sense to you, but we will understand what that means, I'm sure, shortly. So I'm hoping that as we listen to Pete, basically we can just work out all the things that he did wrong and then not do them. And hopefully we can just learn and glean from his wisdom in what he's done so far. So that's kind of the aim of this evening. And hopefully for those of you that are either involved in Eden 2.0 or the Marsh, this is going to be particularly relevant to you. But if you're not, maybe you're considering or weighing up those kinds of options, hopefully this evening will just paint a really good picture of what that sort of stuff looks like. So let's get into this, Pete. Do you want to just tell us, before we get started, so people just know who you are, who are you, what do you do when you're not church planting, and what's your background? Maybe just tell us a little bit of your story. What life was like growing up, that kind of thing. Paint a picture of yourself for us.
Thanks, Jamie. It's good to be with you. My name's Pete. I grew up in the south of the UK, just north of London. I spent a few years in Milton Keynes before I went off to university in Durham in the northeast, which was my first proper taste of life in the north. I'm obviously in the northwest now in Liverpool, but feel like an adopted northerner to some extent. I'm not from a Christian family particularly, although my grandmother is a Christian, but my mum's not, and my dad wasn't, and still isn't. I became a Christian about age 17, about 9 months before I went to university, through a family friend. And particularly those years at university were hugely significant for me as a Christian, growing, understanding more about Jesus and his beauty and glory, and realizing I wanted to serve him, and whatever that looked like. So I studied law in Durham for 3 years. I was a trainee at a church for a couple of years after that. Moved to Liverpool to work with students with UCCF, which I did.
That's how we know each other.
Yeah, that was a great time, 6 years doing that. And then, for the last couple of years, we've been in Walton in North Liverpool, working on this revitalization. So,
brilliant. Well, it'd be great to hear a little bit more in a minute about Walton and what it's like, and obviously what it's been like church planting there. But just to kind of rewind the story a little bit from that point, and maybe delve into less of the practicals and more of the whys. I mean, this, I'd imagine growing up in a non-Christian family, you would have never imagined that you would be doing what you're doing now, planting a church. What are the last thing you ever dreamed that you'd be doing? So when did God sort of first start to plant those seeds and ambitions and dreams in your life? Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the very start of that story?
Yeah, I think the first time I ever really came across church planting as an idea was while I was a trainee. I was part of a big studenty kind of city centre church in Durham. Brilliant church. I loved it. Was really well cared for and loved and trained there. And we did a kind of module in one of our training sessions just on church growth through the ages, and we talked a bit about church planting. And one of the things that got me thinking, as a church, we were obviously based in the city centre, but we did lots of work in the surrounding areas around the city centre, which were much more kind of northeast working class mining villages.
Yep.
And we're
Durham students.
Yes, much less Durham students, much more Geordie, kind of proper Geordie. And there were two particular areas that we were working in, and I lived in one of them. And just chatting to our neighbours, they just didn't ever really go to the city centre for life. They didn't do life there, and so we invited them to church, but there was no interest. Partly because it was a city centre, it just wasn't where they did things.
Yeah.
And so we plugged away. We did lots of stuff up there as a church, various events and things like that, which brought people through. And one or two people did come down into the city centre for church, but most didn't. And it just got me thinking, what difference would it make if there was a church around the corner that I could say, oh, why don't you come over here? This is in your area.
Yeah.
That was the first time we just got thinking about it. And I didn't really think much more about it other than that seemed like a relatively good idea. There were a couple of particular reasons that I asked one of the church leaders why we hadn't done it. that was the kind of trainee I was. Not very good one. That they had a couple of particular reasons why they didn't think it was right to pursue that at that time. When I moved to Liverpool to work for UCCF, I joined a church that was committed from day one to church planting. It was a church plant itself and had wanted that to be kind of part of its DNA. It had planted one church when I arrived in 2012, and just as I arrived, another group left to do revitalization. Actually, a year after that, another group left to plant in North Liverpool, not far from where we are now. About 9 months after that, another smaller group of people left to plant another church. And so I just began to kind of see that actually happening. And one of the big things, I remember we used to have these, every other year we'd go away as a church for a weekend. And on those away weekends, we would invite those church plants to come and be part of that, the ones that were still a bit smaller and newer.
Yep.
And I used to sit in those rooms and look around and think, there's a lot of people here who never, ever would have come to our church. And the only reason that they have become Christians and been rescued into his glorious light is because there was a church that was local to them. That somebody who lived in that area invited them to.
Yes.
That, they never would have come from Everton to the city centre of Liverpool, from the Beechwood estate to the city centre of Liverpool. So that was what really got my, I think, just ignited a bit of a fire in my heart. Said, this is great. Actually, there are people here being saved that never would have heard the gospel apart from an actual church being planted on where they live.
I suppose there's something about Jesus in that, isn't there? It's incarnational. It's, the word that we band around, but it's, as Eugene Peterson says, doesn't he, in The Message, Jesus moved into the neighborhood. Which is a great way of kind of like, putting that phrase, really, which is, I guess, exactly what it is that you're talking about. I mean, we're kind of going off piece a little bit here, but one of the questions that I've been wrestling with in this particular time during lockdown is that some of the latest statistics coming out from Barna say that 48% of all Christians have not attended any online church services at all, which is quite shocking, especially because we've seen, lots of us have seen numbers increase in our online services. And 30% of people have actually attended a different church to the one that they would normally attend. And drawing out of those statistics, I think a lot of people are saying, well, what we might see come out of this time is a bit like what we've seen in the kind of what Amazon did to bookshops. We're going to see in the church world. We're basically going to see market consolidation as everybody is going to move to basically who's got the best online platform, because that's the future. That might just be a reality that we have to face, that happens. But that obviously goes completely against what it is that you're
Yeah.
describing.
Yeah, our online presence isn't that good, to be fair.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you just want to comment on that. I mean, what I think you've said some of it already, but why is local so important, and why should we fight against market consolidation and it's all been taken over by the Amazon of the church world, whatever that looks like? Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think I'd say two things. The first is it speaks into who we are as human beings. We're not people who live life through a screen. So I'm pretty sure
Mm,
most people have got pretty tired of doing stuff through a screen. I
mm,
certainly have. Lots of people in our church have. There is, I think, a renewed hunger for embodied relationships again.
yeah,
And that obviously has some spatial, physical limitations. You can't go anywhere and
yeah,
be anywhere at any one time. So that's a factor. The other thing I think that connects to that is just that we are people who need community.
mm,
So there is something essential about being a Christian, and
mm,
I think it is essential, that's lived out in the community of the church.
mm.
And the fact is, you just can't obey a good percentage of Jesus's commands without actually being connected to other people in a
Yeah,
church. And the gospel is partly put on display in that context. So
mm,
that's what Jesus says, isn't it? John 17. This is how people know you're my disciples, through our unity together. In John 15, it's through our love for each other. Those things you only see
yeah,
um, between people that you can actually see,
yeah,
when it's lived out before you,
yeah,
when you know them. And so I think there is a physical imperative that's essential to what it means to be God's
mm.
people in the church.
And why do you think that is? Because sometimes I'm really surprised that that is the way Jesus ends that sentence. This is how people will know that you're my disciples, especially in that context, as the disciples are, and they are increasingly going on, and you get into the book of Acts, and they're doing amazing things, preaching to thousands of people. People are being healed. It's just ridiculous the stuff that the early church does. That it's just so visible and incredible and miraculous, and yet that it just shocks me that's the way that Jesus ends that sentence. I mean, yeah, I don't know why is it, do you think, that I mean, it's scripture, right? That's what God says. We're just to obey it, but why do you think that is his almost primary apologetic for reaching the culture?
Oh, it's a good question. I guess partly it speaks to our deepest needs as human beings. We're created for um, loving, intimate relationship first and foremost with God Himself,
Mm,
but also with His people. That's what eternal life is. It's to know God and Jesus Christ, whom He sent, and we that fellowship with God takes place in the family of believers. Um,
mm,
that's partly how God. That's partly who God is. So God loves within the Trinity, within Himself. That's who God is, and so we see something of it, I think, played out in the way that we relate to one another in the church.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's beautiful. I think when
Mm,
that's lived out, there is something beautiful, attractive. Um, you know, Jesus says it's like a light in a dark world, and it is.
yeah.
When that's lived out, it is. And Jesus knows more than I do about how to save people. So I trust him
We
that
trust him. Yeah, that's
he
a
knows
huge part of
he
it.
knows what's going to work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Uh, and I wonder as well whether it becomes increasingly important as it feels like the left and right move to further extremes. Um, and I felt like during the lockdown for a while things were kind of coming together a little bit more. I think now with everything that's happening with George Floyd, and I think it's obviously right that we we stand up and say that was wrong, but it does feel like, again, that's kind of pushing divisions. So I think it's all the more important that the church becomes a place where people are united across a diversity of backgrounds. And I think it does speak volumes, because what on earth joins these people together if it isn't Jesus Christ? Nothing else would literally hold them in the room together, other than him. So go on.
I love how Paul puts that in Ephesians 2 and 3. It's a great example of what you're saying. So in Ephesians 2, it's the gospel that unites divided people, Jew and Gentile. And in Ephesians 3, I love what Paul says, that puts on display the manifold wisdom of God. It's a beautiful picture of what the church is, this multicolored, multi-ethnic, multi-language, multicultural, multi-class group of people brought together because they love Jesus more than anything else in the world. And that is what puts the wisdom of God on display to the powers and authorities. That captured my vision for what church should be like. And
it's just beautiful, isn't it? And you think of the way, I mean, you see that that's almost like a bit of a pattern through scripture, isn't it? I suppose it's picked up again at Pentecost. These people in the same room, in the presence of God, speaking the same language. And then again, Revelation, chapter 7, every tribe, tongue, nation before the throne. Like, I just dream of that day. And it does make me sad when churches become very just one type of person. And what we hold up as being a good Christian, sometimes I think basically it depends what kind of church you go to. Either a really good Christian looks like somebody with like tattoos and skinny jeans, or if you go to a different type of church, someone that's really clever with a PhD and chinos. We need a diverse vision, don't we? So can I ask, how have you, I mean, you've now been on this journey a little while. I mean, tell us a bit about Walton. Tell us a bit about your team, and how have you, and not that I'd imagine you've got it perfect at all, because we're all on a journey towards that Revelation 7 vision, but how have you attempted, I suppose, to try and bring this sense of community and locality and diversity together? And how have you done it, and what kind of success have you seen?
Walton is a mostly working class area of Liverpool. Where we are is it's a mix of council houses and privately owned houses. Mostly white. It's not a particularly diverse area, although that's beginning to change as kind of people move around the city a bit more. So that's our area. Interestingly, our team is not really that at all. So where we were before, where we were, the team all came from Christchurch, Liverpool, which is a city centre church in Liverpool. Multi-ethnic, lots of different nationalities represented.
You're a law student from Durham, which makes you inherently posh.
I guess I'm from a slightly more working class background. Neither of my parents went to uni, but my grandfather did. He had a PhD.
But you did go to Durham, which was the same place as Tim Morris. So, and as everybody knows, you won't believe this, Pete, but we have a thing called Breakfast at Timothy's every Sunday morning, where we just basically everybody watches Tim making breakfast.
Can I join that?
You can join it. It's like, it's kind of the most dull but hilarious and fascinating thing that you've ever seen. And then he shares a bit of the Bible thought with us, and it's just a great way to start Sunday mornings before our church service. So it's one of the most bizarre but joyful things that's come out of lockdown for us, I think.
Oh, that's good. That's lovely. So our team is multi-ethnic. We've got people from Malawi, people from Holland, South Africa, America, Brazil. Yeah, so our team's quite diverse in terms of nationality. Probably class-wise, we're basically all middle class, uni educated people. We have a couple of 3 or 4 native Scousers on the team, which is great. I guess in some ways the big thing we've tried to do is to encourage as much of the team as possible to move to the area and to live locally, to get close, and to make their homes and lives here. Put their kids in the schools, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a big cost.
It is, and I think it's interesting. One of the reasons that the church, I think, found its place, found itself where it did, needing help from outside, was partly because of people moving out of the area and kind of commuting in.
Yeah. So just want to quickly explain for people, because we talked about this revitalization as a term. Just do you want to tell us what that is? And because we didn't really kind of cover that, and Ebenezer's story, which is where you are.
Yeah,
it might be just helpful to rewind slightly. And
Ebenezer Chapel, which is where we are, was a thriving Brethren church. It's planted in 1929, and basically over the last 20 or 30 years has declined quite rapidly. Our first contact with the church in 2012, they reached out for help, which was just after we'd done Christchurch had done something similar in Beechwood Chapel. Similar situation, sending a team to help a struggling church, and so they reached out to us, and things kind of went from there. It obviously took a while for things to actually happen, but they declined, and most of the members were more elderly, and I think they recognised if nothing drastic changed, the church would have had to close. Next, 4 or 5 years. So that was the situation, and they invited us in to work with them. So we're not a pure church plant starting from scratch. We're not even a kind of replant, which is somewhere between where maybe a dying church just says, "Here's the building, do what you want with it." We're really trying to renew the church, revitalize the church, work with them to change things and to bring life and vitality to the church and to its witness in the community again. So that's the kind of short version.
I'd imagine that's not necessarily easy. I mean, obviously you're invited in, so they've invited you to be there. But obviously for a bunch of basically uni educated middle class people to rock up in working class estate Walton, join in with people that are basically majority older, probably have very different ideas about the world and politics and what church should look like even. I mean, how have you trodden that journey towards the Revelation 7 vision with that group of people?
With it's tough. It's hard. I think church planting and church revitalization both have their challenges. I've only seen the challenges of revitalization particularly, but there are challenges. I guess one of the big things, you just have to be clear at the outset, this is going to hurt, and it's going to hurt for everyone. There's always pain involved with changing and growing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That the Lord works in us as
pruning.
Exactly. And so I think we tried to be clear about what we were doing and what we weren't doing with the group. One of the big things that goes a long way, which is just what Jesus said. We tried as a team just say, look, let's love these people. Let's, we want as much as possible for it not to feel like a takeover, or that we're better than them, or we know better than them. We're coming because we've been invited and we want to help them. And so I think the first thing we've tried to do is to bring to churches together. That's effectively what's happened. We put two churches in the same building and said, let's
Yes.
be one church together. And we've worked hard at trying to build a sense of togetherness and unity and love for each other. I think one of the things that we often miss when we talk about diversity, you end up with lots of young people from different nationalities, maybe, but age is an extremely difficult barrier to cross, particularly in our society. There are massive gaps between young and old, and so it's not just multi-ethnic or multi-class that puts the gospel on display, but multi-generational. And you see that in Titus, older women teaching younger women. There's that pattern that's supposed to be part of the church that too puts the gospel on display. And I think just being convinced, it makes it harder, but it makes it better, more glorious. To be trying to do this together. We're just convinced that's worth trying to do well.
That's beautiful. It was beautiful. And how did you, I mean, it's these are interesting questions to ask, because we've obviously got we're doing sort of one plant on an estate called the Marsh, which is kind of, I guess, working class, ex-council estate, current council estate type place. And then the other one we're looking at is sort of a mix between the university and then also a similar sort of estate, was council estate, some of it probably still is. Lots of young families as well. So again, how you kind of bring all those worlds together. I mean, culturally, when you went in, I think one of the things people love to talk about when we talk about the stuff is, be a Jew to the Jew and a Gentile to the Gentile. I mean, did you buy yourself a modified car and a baseball hat? How much have you? And I think that's danger. And I think your laugh is right, because I think the danger is that we just stereotype and it's I think Christians have got that verse very wrong in the past, and I have a slight nervousness about it, even though I think it's right and biblical. I mean, how have you maybe changed in your cultural approach?
I basically think it's very easy to do the superficial stuff, and actually what those verses are calling to is a much more radical empathy for people, I think. There's a couple of things I think like we're conscious of. One is just trying to be good listeners and learners of the people around us. So, when I chat to my neighbours, I ask lots of questions. What's it like living here? I just listen for what they think is important about life. And I think that there is a sense in which some of those things are different. People are fundamentally the same. We're all human beings made in God's image. We all desire the same things ultimately, but the way those things have expression, I think, are slightly differently depending on your culture. So some of that's just trying to listen and learn, and but I think also, like, I think it can be overstated, the kind of, you've got to be a particular kind of person to reach particular kind of people. I'm not sure how much I buy that. We've got a few of the people that have started coming to church. One of the guys, is a proper working class Scouse guy. And he doesn't care that I've got a law degree and I've been to university. He cares that we've invited him around for dinner, and that we treat him as a person, as an equal, as someone of worth and value. And that's what actually matters. That's what actually gets a hearing for the gospel, in my experience, when you treat people as people who are valuable. And I think some of the ways Christians have got that wrong is kind of like a kind of I can't think of the best word, like a superiority.
A superiority, do you say?
Yeah. That I'm middle class, therefore I know better. I'm here to educate you and teach you, and I just think, I've got much to learn from these people. They get life in some ways much better than I do. Their priorities in some ways are much more right than mine, I think.
Mm.
And I'm not. We do, I think, in lots of ways, consider ourselves missionaries sent cross-culturally to this area.
Yes.
And so we want to do, we want to do those things as well as possible, learn the culture, the language, I think my family have said I sound more Scouse. I think probably to Scousers I don't, but you want to pick up ways of speaking about things. Of course you do.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's not really the heart of it. The heart is, do you love people? Are you willing to speak to them as people? Have them in your home. Maybe there are ways in which you change what is comfortable to you in order to make them feel comfortable in your home or around you. But people can smell a fake a mile off. I'm not suddenly going to become a tracky wearing Scouser. I'm not that person. But they can tell if you love them, if you care about them, if you think they're valuable and worth spending time with. That's what really matters. And so that's what I think we've tried to do most of all.
That's really helpful. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the journey of getting to that point as well, because I think I was reading earlier something that you'd written, and I think you weren't necessarily felt calling from the Lord. The Lord placed this burden for Walton on your heart, and in the middle of the night, and you broke down in tears, and then you've had this overwhelming love since then of Walton, and you had to go, but rather it was an opportunity that you felt like the Lord put across your path, and you obediently went. So has there been a process of allowing the Lord to kind of break your heart for the people of Walton, and how has that kind of love did it come really naturally, or how has it developed?
I think that's a really good question, Jamie. We're here fundamentally because there's just a massive need. There are so few good, growing, gospel-centered churches in the north of Liverpool. The need is just desperate. That's fundamentally why we're here. Because that, just think that's not okay. People need to have the chance to hear about Jesus, and the guys, the leaders of the church looked for a while, and nobody was really willing to come. Initially, we weren't willing to come, to be honest. We didn't want to do it. We wanted something else, but we prayed, and the Lord just gradually, I think, changed our hearts to say, look, there's a great need here, and we're willing to go. And I think if you're a spiritually healthy Christian, as you move into an area and spend time with people and just seeing what's going on, the Spirit of Christ in you will move you to be broken for the things that break him, to be concerned for the things that concern him, to want to see change where he would want to see change. I think that is something that happens to you if you're a Christian. But I think we have deliberately sought to see those things and to notice those things and to burden ourselves with those things. We regularly walk around the area and pray. We pay attention to what's happening in the area. We try and talk to people and listen to what burdens them and what their struggles are, and those kinds of things. But that's actually why moving matters, because you can do all of that without moving, but it's not your place. But when we've bought this house, we've moved into the area, our daughter will go to the school in this place. We've got to know our neighbours. We've tried to serve them as well as we can during lockdown. these are our people.
Yeah.
We desperately want them to know Jesus, and yeah, the biggest factor I think in that for us and for the people in our team who've moved is kind of putting your money where your mouth is a bit, and putting embracing the cost of moving, and putting yourself in amongst the people. That's the thing that really makes the difference. I think it's the key ingredient in church planting. I think it's one of the reasons why so many of the kind of mission stations of the 50s on council estates ultimately failed. They were run by people who were very committed, very devoted to the work and the people, but they didn't live there.
Wow.
And I think that's one of the crucial failures of that idea, that kind of strategy. And it's one of the crucial things that I think makes church planting work or fail. If you're willing to embrace that particular cost.
Yes. It strikes me there, I mean, thinking about some of our guys in the areas we're working in, that sometimes it's even possible to live in an area but not really live in it.
Yeah.
And that's partly just because it's easy to get to other places. Or, or you could live on the boundary of, one of these estates, and you can choose to kind of face either way. So you kind of half fit in, half fit out. And I think it can feel like a real, whether you're thinking about maybe I'm just going to really invest in the community in which I'm in rather than always traveling out, or maybe I am actually going to move into a new area so I can really reach it effectively. It kind of feels like standing on a precipice with kind of much risk, and it's incredibly scary and daunting and costly. Because we love being around people that are the same as us, and it's just really hard. I mean, it kind of scares me talking to you about it. I mean, what is it that has driven you over that precipice? I know others that have done the same. What has been the thing that has made you or pushed you to do that?
Ultimately, it's a conviction that it won't work unless we do. So,
Sure.
That some of it is just saying, look, do we want to do this or not? If we want to, let's be all in, and let's go for it. The truth, though, is that we would never have come here if others hadn't have come with us. We wouldn't have done that. We are not superhero Christians. We are ordinary Christians, and we were scared. We still are sometimes about what we've taken on, but we are one of the biggest sources of comfort in the ordinary course of daily life is knowing that other people did this with us, and for a bunch of those people, we can walk around the corner and see the evidence of their commitment to. We took a punt because we were obviously the first to move of the group. I'm the pastor. We led, but we did that because we knew other people were coming with us, and we knew they were putting their lives on the line too. They were going to commit to, and they were with us in the trenches, so to speak, to do that. That makes a massive difference. Makes a huge difference. Knowing that there are people you can count on, and I think having that sense of community makes a massive difference. I've got huge respect for people that do that without the backing of a kind of team with them. I think that's incredibly courageous. We're not that courageous. We wouldn't have done that.
But I think it kind of brings you full circle back to, in terms of community. It's how, I'm a strong believer in team for that reason. I think it's biblical. We're made to be with people and not be lone rangers. And sometimes, because of necessity, you have to be a lone ranger, and fair play to the people that are. But I don't think that's God's intention for how we're supposed to work, like we've said already.
And you see that in Paul's ministry, right? So he's always with others.
Yeah.
That's why his letter, like most of Paul's letters, aren't Paul's letters. They're Paul and Timothy's letters, or Paul and Timothy and Barnabas or Silas. You know.
Yeah.
But we forget that.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. It's fantastic. Yeah, do what you love with friends. I think it's just one of the best I ever got in ministry. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
So do you want to share with us, Pete, before we wrap up? I mean, what have been your greatest mistakes, your greatest victories? Give us, just to paint us a picture. I mean, how long have you been doing this as well, just so people know, and then tell us what have been the highs and the lows.
Yeah, well, the date we're recording this is the 12th of June. So that is exactly 1 year and 1 month since we started. It was the 12th of May, 2019. So we're a year in. We spent about 9 months kind of preparing to come. So that's the kind of time scale this has been going. We've made so many mistakes. We had a leaders meeting a couple of nights ago, just reflecting on some of the things we would have done differently if we could wind back the clock.
Yeah.
I think that some of those are particular to our situation, doing a revitalization and working with an existing church, an existing group of people.
Yeah.
We made lots of changes in a short period of time, which I'm convinced they were necessary. I'm still convinced about that. But I think the way we did that, I would do differently. We made lots of changes and we just kind of did them. And we asked for forgiveness rather than permission. And I think I would have done that differently. I would have just been much more open earlier on to say, look, here are some of the things I think we're going to change and why. And I think we would have still got pushback. Yes. And I don't think that would have changed our minds, but I think it would have saved some heartache, because people at least would have known what's changing, why it's changing. We did a bit of that, but we were just quite vague, when I think it would have helped to be much more specific about that. So basically lots of our failures are that in a different form. In slightly different form, it's basically just that. Communication is so overstated, isn't it? We communicate, but it's really true. If you communicate clearly with people, and you have to keep communicating clearly, you can't just say something once, you have to keep explaining why and why and why. And you just have to be willing to have some of those hard conversations as well, about why it's got to be like this and not some other way. And that's tough to do that. I wish I'd been more willing to listen at the start. I think I've been convicted about this over the last 6 months, that I think I did actually come in with an attitude of saying, look, I know best, so you just listen to me and I'll fix things here.
Yeah. I think it's hard not to, probably, to be honest.
Yeah. But
we're just so prone to thinking like that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, and I was wrong. and frankly, the people here have been so gracious with us. I've had to repent and say, look, I'm sorry. I don't have all the answers. I don't know any better.
Yeah,
we're gonna have to work this out together. And I need to ask more questions and learn to listen more. So there's some things I got wrong that I wish I'd done better. But
thanks for your humility. It's really helpful.
God has been really gracious to us. I think we know it's always going to be slow growth in our context. That's where we are. This is going to, I preached on, we did Mark's Gospel. That was the second thing we preached. We did 1 Peter first and then Mark. And I remember preaching on the parable of the growing seed. day and night. You plant and you wait, and saying to the church, this is going to be 5-10 years
Yep.
before we look around and say, oh, look, God has done something here. We're okay. We're not dying anymore. So we've committed for long term. But we have seen God's grace to us. We've seen a few new people join. Some of those are just random people who just turned up, and for whatever reason they stayed with us. One lady who's originally from the Bahamas has moved into the area, saw the church, came along, stayed. Praise the Lord. We've seen a few people that had left the church over that time, that it was struggling and dying, come back.
Oh, great! That's really good.
And we've started to see a couple of people become Christians as well.
Fantastic.
One guy from the area who just started coming along. One person who's a friend of one of the people on our team was invited along and has become a Christian. So we praise God for that. And evangelistically, we're just starting to develop relationships, and we've had a couple of really good, particularly over Christmas. We had good numbers of people into the building, and good engagement. I think we're conscious that things don't change overnight. The church has a mostly positive reputation in the community with people, for being a good place. But there's not much kind of, people don't really want to go. So, we're conscious it's going to take time to persuade people, look, this church is worth coming to, and Jesus particularly is worth knowing and checking out.
Amen.
So, it's going to be long-term, faithful in relationships with people, inviting, keeping on praying, proclaiming Jesus. And but we're encouraged to just see some signs of God's grace to us. And I think one of the things we've been really encouraged by is just slowly seeing the church become one, people looking out for each other, and those generations mixing and learning to be church family together has been great. Like we started doing these midweek gospel communities on Wednesdays, and so we host one in our home. We have a meal every week, and around our table, the youngest member is 16, unless you count our daughter, but she's normally in bed by dinner. She's only 9 months, and the oldest member is 88.
Wow.
And we've got pretty much everything in between.
Yeah.
And that there are lots of challenges that come with. That's just our little gospel community. There's another one that's very similar.
Yeah.
Lots of challenges, but it's just great joy. The challenge of like cooking dinner. How do you cook dinner that a 16-year-old and an 88-year-old is going to like? It's actually quite hard, even just at that level.
Yes.
But the joy of seeing everyone share a meal together, study the Bible together, listen to each other, pray together.
Yes.
We thank God for that.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. I really just admire your very kind of humble and just obedient attitude to what it is you're doing. I think it's really beautiful. And I think one of the dangers, and it'd be interesting just to hear your kind of perspective on this as well. I think one of the dangers and pitfalls of church planting is that as you're sent to go and do it, you're very aware of other people watching from outside to see what the results are, and feel that pressure of rather than just slowly building that beautiful picture of people around the dinner table, to instead just basically get an awesome social media profile, a great website, lots of people coming, and some photos of a full room. And that's it's just a massive temptation in ministry generally, isn't it? I mean, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, it's hard, because I think our motives are always mixed, and I am conscious in which I really want Jesus's name to be honored, but I would love it too if my name was honored as well.
Yeah,
I've just got to be aware that is that is part of what's going on in my heart, and I have to fight that with every fiber of my being every single day of my life.
Yeah.
But basically, that's what it comes down to. It's really easy to get a kind of hero complex. You know, people will say, "Oh, you're so brave, moving where you've moved, and giving up what you've given up to do what you're doing." And
Yeah.
I have to keep saying to them and to me, we're just ordinary Christians trying to obey Jesus. The Christian life, Jesus says the Christian life is costly for everyone who follows him. We're just following him. We're not special. We're just ordinary Christians trying to do that. And you know, maybe one of the reasons we look heroic to people is because we basically do whatever we can to make the Christian life as comfortable as possible for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, that's I'm convicted that's often true for me, even while we're here. You know, but I think we just try to keep remembering who we're really here to serve. I did a training session for some people considering going into ministry recently, and I gave them 8 words to describe ministry, and the first one was service. And I said to them, when you're a servant in a big house, none of the important guests know your name. Why would they? You're just a servant. They don't know your name. But the master of the house knows your name. And if you're a servant, that's enough. It's enough to know that Jesus knows me. He knows who I am. I don't need other people to know about me.
Wow.
Or to think what I'm doing is great. It's enough if Jesus is pleased.
Yes.
And I have to remind myself of that. That doesn't come naturally to me, that that perspective on life. But I pray, yeah, by God's grace, that more and more I'd be satisfied that Jesus knows me and knows what we're doing, and is more committed to it than we are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So
Pete, that's a beautiful illustration. Yeah, it really is. One of our guys was preaching, Josh, the other day, said, "You're famous enough in Christ already." I think that's all the fame that we ever need, isn't it? That the God of the universe knows our name and loves us and cherishes us. What else would we possibly ever want?
Yeah.
And yeah, our hearts are just terrible. So yeah, Pete, it's been great to chat. Great to catch up with you as well, from my perspective, and just hear what's been going on, and just be inspired by it. It's just the thing that has most struck me about it is just the simplicity and the beauty. And I really hope for us guys here in Lancaster that's just something that we can learn from as well. That beauty of simplicity, community, and just stripping out some of that other stuff that has infected our perspective of what church is. So Pete, it's been fantastic to be with you. Thank you so much for coming on, and we will be praying for you for every blessing in the rest of this crazy year. Have an awesome time, and we will see you next time.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Jimmy.
Thanks,
Good
Pete.
to talk to you.